So lately, I have been really peppering you guys with all the negative content. So today is a little bit different. I want to talk about a game that is a straight up industry leader in a lot of ways and something we should be praising to hopefully proliferate those positive practices. That was really wordy, I know. My bad. The game is Warframe. Truthfully, I've not played Warframe in quite some time. I used to stream it a hefty amount on Twitch, but then I had this really big realization.
Oh, she's really making that banana last.
So now I don't stream on Twitch anymore for the time being, but the unequivocal peak of my streaming career certainly took place within Warframe, and thus I have always kept a close eye on it. The most important thing about Warframe, for those that have never played or heard of the game, is that it is entirely free to play. There is a purchasable currency called Platinum, but the player trade economy is open and thriving, so Platinum can easily be earned, farmed, or traded for without spending any of your own money. On top of the vibrant player-driven trade system economy, there is also an industry frontrunner level of customization. I've mentioned it in previous videos, but a term fashion frame refers to the purely cosmetic-driven pseudo-endgame that the community has created, and it is pretty cool to see in action if you enjoy that sort of stuff. The second area where Warframe is indisputably an industry spearhead is community, streamer, and creator relations. To explain this best, I need to go on sort of a tangent, but it will eventually all tie back in, I promise. Mainstream outlets nowadays in gaming journalism are trash. Sites like Kotaku, Polygon, IGN, and more are still a primary source for information, but not because of any talent or worth. Simply put, their relevance can be directly tied to their insider connections, which result in most of the meaningful information being funneled to them exclusively, which in a way holds their audience captive and hostage. If you want the latest news, you need to go to the companies that have it. Those companies, regardless of talent or skill, are the mainstream giants, and even with this near monopoly on information, many gamers still choose to wait, avoid the sites entirely, and get their news from independent creators on YouTube and Twitch that align closer with their points of view and interests. The freedom of choice on YouTube and Twitch means a more engaged audience. Subscribers or followers aren't pinned into following creators on these platforms due to exclusivity, in most cases. They simply follow because they often agree with the creator or otherwise respect, support, or identify with their material. The same cannot be said of mainstream outlets, which are holding tight, white knuckles clenched, to the last few things that keep them relevant. A lot of games companies and developers play right into this, giving privileged access to those mainstream outlets when it is completely undeserved. This hits close to home for me as well. Some of the games I love most dearly do exactly that, and it's infuriating. Warframe, however, does not do this nearly as often as most or even all of their competition, and instead take a wildly different but extremely successful approach to grassroots marketing and community building. The Warframe Partner Program for streamers is an initiative designed to reward loyal streamers of the game with their own dedicated in-game artwork, a better relationship with developers, and the tools to foster their own community within the overarching universe of Warframe. With the uptake in Twitch viewership across the board, this is a fantastic idea, and it truly helps build deeply ingrained interest in thousands of smaller guilds, clans, and communities, which leads to more social longevity in the game as a whole. Longevity itself is an easy praise when it comes to Warframe. It has some rocky moments in its past, particularly closer to its launch many years ago, but since then it has steadily grown to colossal heights, and there is no sign of this growth slowing, because they have given the creators proper tools to grow their own audience within the game itself, and the positive feedback loop of creators themselves growing, thus growing all of Warframe, thus helping the creators grow even more and even faster, is a system that has almost no expiration date on it, as long as Digital Extremes, the developers behind Warframe, continue to support the game as a whole. The prioritization of individual creators instead of only using large, uninteresting, and unappealing journalism sites for their main marketing means that Warframe has a smoother roadmap for continual and lasting growth. This by itself is already an industry-leading practice. Not many games out there provide tools even remotely similar or nearly as useful to streamers, creators, and guild leaders, clan organizers, you name it, and anyone really who participates in the social aspect of Warframe to a high capacity, but they have gone still further than that. Warframe has now hosted multiple streamer drop events on Twitch, something I would be extremely hopeful other companies are paying attention to and will emulate. The drops work by basically allowing viewers watching Warframe streamers to acquire items from that watch time. It has a system that does need some tweaks and some work, I'll acknowledge that. The first time around is when I personally utilized it, and I had most of the time thousands upon thousands of viewers, but a lot of that viewership was AFK or idle players who were just farming drops. I will say that openly. The second time around, the system improved somewhat, but there are still bots that are farming 20 different streams at a time for items. That still exists, and the system isn't perfect overall. However, it still helped Warframe rank higher on Twitch, rake in more streamers, more viewers, more players, and more interest because of a mutually beneficial program to every single party involved. Other games have started to show signs of the same type of system or events, tiny little signs. The Division, the very game I created my channel around, has made a pass at it, but it was nothing really even close to the level of Warframe's events. Still, even in a most basic and rudimentary form, it was a beneficial event for streamers, creators, viewers, developers, everyone, and we can only hope more companies follow suit with what Warframe is pioneering. I am accused time and time again of being overly negative, and in a lot of ways those accusations are correct. The way I examine the whole industry is now through an influencer lens. What I mean by that is, what effect do my own words have? In the grand scheme of things, this channel is tiny, but the very real truth is that it still affects thousands of gamers, both opinions and purchasing habits. I advise all gamers to get news, opinion, and information from a variety of sources, minimum of 3 to be totally honest. Because if I tell people a game is bad, what's the worst case scenario? They don't buy it, thus coming out neither ahead nor behind, and perhaps they regret that decision and end up seeing other footage from other sources, which is important, and then decide to buy. The absolute worst thing is that my negativity prevented them from playing for a very short period of time. Now let's flip the script and say that I hype something up over and over and over. I shill the hell out of it and convince a bunch of players to purchase it or pre-order it. Well, the worst case scenario now is far darker. If they end up not liking the game because I oversold and overhyped it, they are out $60 or whatever the cost is. They now possibly cannot buy a different game that they would have enjoyed far more, and there is a tangible, concrete, and permanent detrimental effect caused by my content. That's what I mean by the phrase influencer lens, and it is my belief that negative, skeptical, and reserved content far outweighs in almost every possible metric overhyped, delusional fanboy fanaticism. When I truly believe a game to have potential and value, I won't shy away from discussing it, but those times will be less frequent than the times that I preach of caution. In the case of Warframe, there is no downside. The worst case scenario is players try the game and do not like the action pacing or the grinding or any number of other features, which is totally fair, and they uninstall. They may have lost, a few hours at worst? But at best, they find themselves immersed in a world with vibrant social and economic systems, potential growth as a creator, reward systems for supporting independent upcoming streamers and YouTubers, and constant, immense, and well-developed updates that bring open world segments, new enemy bosses, new frames, weapons, and much more. Not to mention the extremely deep lore surrounding the entire universe and the amazing storyline. The storyline was not there at launch. It took years to form, that is true, and this may ring some alarm bells as gamers harken back to the repeated broken launch scenarios so prominent in nowadays industry, and having to wait months or even years for developers to fix content. That is true, but the key difference is Warframe is free, so there was no initial sunk cost. Players just avoided the game till it was in a place where interest was deserved. They didn't waste money up front, and now the interest is deserved, and the player base reflects that. I have personally never encountered a more generous or accepting community in a game across the entire industry as I did in Warframe. For the most part, that is really important. Side note, the game is not void of problems. There is this program in Warframe where regional moderators control a chat filter, and they are in charge of community policing, if you will, in certain zones. That doesn't always go well. They had this one mod named Friend Zoning Misandrist, which quite literally means friend zoning man-hater, and it was this whole big ordeal where they got offended by a joke, so everyone made the joke more often, and it spiraled out of control to where people were banned simply for linking certain in-game items that constructed a broken phrase and said Neza is a trap or anything similar to that. There's a lot more to that story too, and it was basically hateful behavior by someone against others for perceived hateful behavior by others towards things and topics they cared about. It's really just a whole disaster if you try and follow it mentally. It's absurd. It was a stupid cycle, and when you have a bunch of programs that promote social interaction and build communities, you get bad apples. So while it was a sort of fiasco, it's not reflective of Warframe as a game, not in the slightest. So yeah, anyways. When I was heavily involved with the community, people would just give me frames or weapons or items, and it was truly one of the most welcoming experiences I have had as a streamer or creator in general across my entire time doing it, which is multiple years now. Unlike many other games where the first thing you hear when you log in is "get good." Perhaps the player base unity can be explained in part by the game's deprioritization of PvP, who knows, but regardless of why, it appears to be an industry leader in community sentiment as well. Volatile ups and downs that occur in other games surrounding individual patches or balancing tweaks are more muted and less noticeable in Warframe. The player base is in the hands of a development team that produces content they want, content they enjoy, and promotes all creators with loyalty to the game, which helps gamers find the right fit for them on a social level, and around the entire cycle goes. To wrap up, Warframe is leading the industry in multiple ways, and I hope greatly that other developers pay attention specifically to their community development approach and emulate their clearly successful programs and systems. There is no reason not to try the game if you have not already, or give it another go if you've been absent for quite a while. That's it though. As always, there are links down below to support the channel. Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and have a nice night.